Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Chris Decor Radio Podcast. My name is Brian, and joining me are some amazing friends of mine. We got Elio and Mark, aka Late to the Game. Chris is troubleshooting his PC. We will see if he's able to make the show today. But we've got so much to talk about. This week, I think, has been jam-packed. Namely, we have the Game Award nominations, which has caused, obviously, a lot of consternation online, a lot of debate about the Game Awards itself. But I think overall, these were some really solid recommendations. In the pre-show, we were talking about our love for BeLatro or BeLatro. I always butcher it. And yeah, I think that's a standout. So I'd like to talk with you guys about that. But first, I think we want to focus in on some of the Final Fantasy XIV news this week, as Yoshi P has announced that another studio has been making this game, but they are making a mobile version of Final Fantasy XIV. Elio, in our podcast chat room that we coordinate the shows on, said, I am absolutely making this show today. So let's toss to you, man. What is your reaction to this news? And then we'll break it down.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? So, like, on the one hand, some surprise, but also we had known about there was going to be there had been a patent or something for the Chinese mobile version of this a while ago. So there had been some, maybe there'll be a Chinese only app or whatever.
Yeah. Well, there's a Final Fantasy 15 mobile MMO.
It's like the light thing. Yeah. I honestly, tentative excitement, a lot of concerns in terms of all the ways it could go wrong, both from a mobile perspective, both from Lightspeed Studios being owned by Tencent, but like tons of reasons to be like very cautious and hesitant. Yeah. But if this goes well, not only is this really exciting from just a general 14 standpoint, and basically the closest you'd probably ever get to a pseudo 14 classic, but also exciting from the fact that an enormous amount of players outside of the West, and like America in particular, like are phone or mobile only players. Like a lot of gamers are mobile only. So the doors that this could open to new people and like breathe more life into 14 are legion, assuming everything doesn't go poorly. And the reason I have more hope than usual is because Yoshi P seems like kind of very oversee on top of this. And the stuff we have gotten from Lightspeed Studios is PR speak, but the PR speak at least is being done in a way that like kind of shows that they get it. So hopefully, realistic, let's say.
What do you think, Mark?
I mean, I haven't read anything about it. I saw y'all talking about it this week in the Discord. So I'm curious, how you mentioned this is the closest thing to like a 14 classic. Have they revealed how much parity this is going to have, both in terms of content and like integration with the other 14 player base? Have they talked about that yet, or is it all pontificate?
Well,
okay.
They've talked a little bit about it. So first off, it's only ARR at launch, and they are going to release the other expansions over time. However, their cadence is going to depend both on player feedback and how it's doing and stuff. So like they didn't give like any kind of like what regular scheduling that will be for stuff coming out. It is effectively its own client. It is completely disconnected and removed from 14. However, they in their notes seemed like they are intending to recreate all forms of content. So like EXs, they even alluded to ultimates. However, we have not seen any version of the combat yet, so we don't know, is it like a 6-button simplified version, is it a 32-button crazy version, or what? But we also know that there is movement of like moving around and dodging AoEs, because Yoshi P referenced that.
Okay, interesting. I mean, I agree with the point about getting to the mobile player base. If you look at Brian, we've talked about this, I feel like a lot, but where gaming is growing exponentially compared to where it's slow and mature is the East, and gamers in the Philippines and Vietnam and China, other countries in the APEC area, they spend most of their time on their phones, right? And reaching them, I think, is a good intended thing. I do wonder long term how this potentially fractures a player base, or do you eventually bring them together, or do you have no concerns since you're basically bringing brand new players online in these areas who are going to create their own type of ecosystem, if you will?
I am hopeful in my mind, because I think either A, it's going to be its own isolated ecosystem, but it still brings revenue for Square Enix and 14 in general, which still can only really boon them in that way, right? Yeah. There's also because they're isolated, I think they're either going to have isolated communities, or you're going to have communities of crossover. I can't imagine there's a plethora of 14 players who go, oh, there's a mobile version, simplified mobile version now, I'm just going to stop playing 14 and just play that, right? Like Absolutely. That doesn't
There's
seem like
definitely a market for that outside just the fact that it's on mobile, namely because there's plenty of people because it's a free to play game, it means no subscription. There's plenty of people who want to experience the story. And right now, the way that they are doing that is waiting for the free trial to expand to go into the next expansion. And so this is interesting. It seems like whatever kind of cadence it has.
I think it's like duty support, where it's like a thing where a lot of people don't think it's going to make any difference, but actually a large amount of players who got super into the mobile version might go, actually, I'd like to try out the PC or the console version. I think we're more likely to gain people than stay neutral, or I think losing people is incredibly unlikely.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be many people that go, I'm mad about a MOBA version, so I'm out of here, right? I think the conversion rate of mobile to PC is real, whatever that is. I think it also depends on, too, where this gains most popularity and also the widespread use of PCs, too, right? You know, how many people have a PC there versus just staying on the mobile version. I do look at that comment from Serverroll in YouTube about there being a Switch version. I mean, I could see them easily going, hey, we have it for Switch and it's the mobile version. But
they did that with 15.
They did, which that made me a little sad. But
I think it depends on Switch 2's hardware.
Oh, yeah.
Really? Yeah. I think that's the core.
Switch 2, in my mind, this would tell me that the current version, the mobile, not the mobile, the actual console PC.
What are we going to call it out?
Yeah. Oh, geez.
Console version. Console version would be
which version are we talking about?
If they put mobile on Switch, then you can't say the console version because the console version could be either the mobile or the
PC. But that's something that you could see them port to the original Switch, and then the question ends up being which version becomes the main kind of version. Especially imagine, just if you will, playing theoretical numbers here. Imagine the mobile version being 100 times more popular than the current version of Final Fantasy XIV, meaning they release that on Switch, meaning anybody who is like, hey, I really want to check out Final Fantasy XIV, then if they asked me, like, how do you sell the real Final Fantasy XIV when at some point this is a simplified monetized in a way that is not have a barrier of entry like the subscription, and then you can experience the story. And imagine if all of a sudden all the voice acting is like, you could see there's things that people have wanted in the core game that I do wonder if they actually address in the mobile version, and thus the mobile becomes the premier version of Final Fantasy XIV at some point down the road.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years from now is 10 years from now. Like, who knows?
Right.
That might as well be an eternity. I think the thing that to point to is it's starting an ARR means that they have such a roadmap of things to go through that even if they release an expansion a year, that's still 5 expansions or going to be like, so like it's still 6 years before we even think about. Then on top of that, you have the thing where if they would be basically probably taking all the voice recordings from the vanilla game. If they're adding anything, they'd probably be adding it to the core game first anyways, because that's where their primary development and deals with the voice actors and all that things is going through Square. So it's like, even if it's 100x, so like, here's the thing. If we have a world where like, okay, there's 100x players on the mobile version, you're probably still having fundamental development going into the main game. Then does it become the R&D version? Maybe. But I think there's still, as long as it's healthy enough, it doesn't matter. It's still effectively the premier version, and then there's the mass version. I don't know what else to call it. I mean, it's a terrible way to describe it, but it's like, I don't know what else to call it.
I mean,
you have 2 versions, the premier and the ass.
Yeah. Which one do you want to play? It is interesting.
I'm an ass man.
Me too.
Well, boy, I have something for you. It's called Final Fantasy XIV Mobile.
Yeah, exactly.
But to your point about it being like 10 years away, it being a lifetime, it is. But I do imagine they have to be weighing these type of questions in their own mind internally right now. Like, if we get to a point where, because I just looked it up, I was curious, but gaming in the APAC market, developing markets, accounts for 50% of gaming revenue globally right now. That's a lot proportion to where gaming has historically been. So you might see mobile 14 grow faster than core 14 out of the gates. And I wonder how those, variables force them to think about, do they synergize this environment? Can they synergize this environment with how they're setting it up? I think that's probably the ideal, right? Like, I would like to be able to play 14 on my computer, my PlayStation, my Switch, and then maybe on my phone if I just want to do some quest or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, look, Yoshi P thinks long term. Like, the one thing that you can give the man credit for is he tends to be thinking about those kind of problems ahead of most people in his field. So there's no question those conversations haven't happened. It's also worth pointing out, with the recent letter that they put out, we know that they've been working on this for 5 years. Like, this has been in some kind of development since effectively Shadowbringers came out. So they've probably very much been thinking about the ups and downs of all that for a while.
Oh, yeah.
The thing I would say is that my initial reaction, and it still kind of holds true, is that back in the day, they were working on a Final Fantasy XI mobile version and / remake. And so that never saw the light of day. That was announced as they were like, hey, we're going to wind down. And now, just like this last in the last week or two, they actually have a survey asking various things about Final Fantasy XI. And I was like, good Lord, don't give me hope. Because they added in the Final Fantasy XI raid with 7.1. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, Elio. In terms of it, because I'm just ultimately curious to see how that plays out. But obviously, you have Final Fantasy XI themes and assets in the world of 14. And what I would kill for at this point is, because one of the things I put in the feedback is, like, combine the subs, like remake 11 in the 14 engine. So that way you're off of play online, but make it 11, make it, it is Eureka, basically. Like, keep the whole game that way. And with the combined sub, you can choose what you want to launch into. It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to worry about, like, even do voice acting. Just make this game something where anybody who's subbed can take part in it. And I'd be happy, because the 11 version remake never saw the light of day, and I think that's a real loss. And seeing 14 actually make that, and it seems like this is definitely going to be something that happens, it makes me hope that at some point Square Enix actually invests in Final Fantasy XI in some degrees. That was the initial thought I had.
You could hope that if this Final Fantasy XIV mobile goes well, that they could just work with Lightspeed a second time and have Final Fantasy XI mobile, which there's a lot of ways in which I can imagine that being simpler, especially with all the work done with the 14 version, if they can translate any of that over, not least of which being, like you said, like 50% of a Realm Reborn's enemies are just 11 enemies retextured.
Yep, exactly.
No, yes, I think
work has been done. Like, there is, and if you did it in the same engine, there's a lot of crossover that you benefit from that work. Oh, hey, 11 made this really cool little thing. Oh, let's go ahead and make that. Like, let's just right click, copy, and let's go.
Not to go, and not to go too far into the 11 Lions Raid stuff, because I could go for hours. But the thing is that I am seeing the amount of people who played 11 who are thrilled and excited by it is legion, and the amount of people who have not played 11 who are thrilled for them or in some way thrilled by it is legion. The amount of people who are actually subbing to 11 is, I'm sure, a number that is real, especially for 11 subs numbers, but probably not a whole bunch. But I think there's a lot of vested interest for people who are deep into 14. They are curious about 11, and they have been. But between play online, the way I describe it is this: I have literally cleared multiple savage fights blind faster than I was able to create an account to play Final Fantasy XI. That is how difficult it is.
The account creation, the process to play 11 is the end game and boss. If you beat that, everything else, it's just smooth sailing. I'm joking, because obviously there's various different aspects. But
it's only a certain level of hyperbole. It's only a certain level.
Only a degree. Now, and Chat Four Horsemen says that they've been saying this for years, but I feel like the engine is actually outdated. The game looks like PS3 quality. I wish we'd get some serious Unreal Engine 5 style updates. If not, let me know about a new MMO. Do you think? Because I think putting 11 in the 14 engine is the most practical short circuit way to go about it. But Square Enix has been playing around with some Unreal Engine 5. I don't think they would shift 14 to Unreal Engine 5, they would just make a brand new MMO at that point.
There's so many reasons not to do that. Well, first off, also graphics is not look. Engines create issues. Like yes, engines can have lighting renderers. Engines can have like all sorts of things, but graphics are not a fundamental pure alone part of engine. Like your engine doesn't define your graphic styling, does not define your graphic texture resolution. Well, some can, but so like that alone, like you could make 14 look worse than it does and put it in Unreal. I've seen a lot of people just take pure models and throw them in and they look terrible because lighting actually really matters. Just lighting isn't just better or worse. But secondly, the amount of work involved in doing that, like you said, would just at that point just make a new MMO. Like it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't.
See, that's where like, back to kind of like my critique and where I have a video coming out about the state of the game for Final Fantasy XIV like this week, because we've seen a lot of pushback on the game itself, which I always just expected due to Dawn Trail. But I was like, my dream would have been that they would say, hey, Endwalker concludes the story, etc. Maybe there's a little that chapter gap, and then we're going to do a massive time jump, and then it ends up being 14.2 to say, hey, we're picking this up, and now it's a new progression. We're going to, we're doing all this stuff right from the start, and that obviously didn't happen. They're going with Dawn Trail. We're probably going to continue to see that trend, but at some point, let's go ahead.
I would say spiritually though it is already 14.2. I think like thematic, like the elements is that yes, they didn't do a time jump, but with how concretely 6.0 ends and the way in which like clearly 7.0 is effectively an ARR of like setting up a whole new arc. It's like they did kind of do that, right? But we don't obviously we're not getting a new engine, new game 14.2 the way that like 10.2 is a new game. Yeah.
I'm curious because I'm obviously not as much of a 14 player as you guys, but you mentioned bringing 11 back, and I know the PC client of 11 is still around. They discontinued console versions in 2016.
Yeah,
so there's like
that was actually another
6
question on the survey to jump in, is that they were like, "Hey, would putting it back on consoles make you play more?" And I said, "Absolutely." But please continue, sir.
But I guess that's my question: how, like, for you? To the two of you, I mean, there was like a 5 to 6 year period where 14 and 11 overlapped. How did that impact the games you played? Did you play both? Did you make time to play both? Did you prefer one over the other?
They actually had a combined sub, so I played both.
Okay,
for a little bit, and then that eventually it was a time thing. I guess like I don't think they envisioned it to be continually linked.
It was kind of about getting people over from 11 to 14, really. That was the main reason there was that combined sub. I never played 11 a lot. I played 11 a very little bit, partly just because I was young enough that like it was a weird, like I didn't know enough about it. I didn't get into it. But even if I had been, I only tend to play one MMO like hardcore at once. And I think a lot of people who played 11 who moved over 14 is the same case of like, I don't think you can get them to play both like full-time MMOing. But that's why 11 mobile version that kind of emphasizes it being a free to play story version that people can like get, they can get money through, actual microtransactions of like a glamour or a house or whatever might be a better way to go to get people to still get leverage 11. Cause I think trying to leverage 11 from a sub standpoint, other than people who are very dedicated to it already, just doesn't make sense these days.
Yeah, I guess that's where my question was kind of going to, is like, how much value is it to bring something back like that, where your player base, at that point, you would potentially split or cannibalize your player base for something else. And the question is what is the future for you? Is it continuing to build on 14, especially now that you're doing the mobile version, and then going from there? Just curious, because I'm the same way. Like I'll play World of Warcraft for 1 month, and then I'll cancel a sub and jump back to 14 when I'm playing an MMO. I can't find the time to do multiple. I don't know how Asmund does it, even though he does stream for a living. I don't know how he does all these. He
recently talked about how he's just not doing it anymore. Like he's just focusing on single player games, because there's they're complete, and then there's not all this like rigmarole that kind of comes along with it. And I honestly was like, that just sounds like. Well, I think everybody does, especially like it's a thing of age. Like as you have more time, less time and responsibility, it's like, well, do I want to sit down and play this game that's going to require a lot out of me and a lot of investment? Not that those games shouldn't exist, but it comes down into like, okay, like I've said this multiple times throughout multiple podcasts, is like, it is literally about accessibility. Now, I'm not a mobile gamer. I'm not going to install Final Fantasy XIV mobile on my phone. It's because I don't have any games on my phone. I like to, when I'm off work, I like to set my phone away from me and hang out with, my family, or play a console game, or play a game, on the handheld. Like it's
you actually have a social life compared to.
Well, it's a guaranteed built-in fact that like when I, like people will like, it's like, all right, they'll swarm you if you're not careful. But it's the aspect is like, from an investment in gameplay, it's the Switch, or it's my Logitech G Cloud, or it's the Xbox, or it's the PlayStation. It has that kind of ingrained experience, and I find myself, outside of the fact, like New World of Tournaments on console, so I've been playing that on my Xbox, and I've been having fun with that. But it's not like as aggressive ever as I used to play. It's usually like, I'll get a little bit of time, and it's about accessibility, meaning don't put all these different barriers in front of me to play. And one of those barriers right now is money. Like, wait, what are you asking? Because it's like, all right, well, I also have this huge backlog. That's why like pausing, purchasing like new games isn't hard, because I can literally look at like all these great games and I'm like, oh, I should finish Elden Ring. Oh, I should do this too. Like, I want to play that. I've had fun with that, but it becomes the thing where it's like, where is my time best spent?
Yeah, and also to like Mark, to also one of your points earlier, like I think the thing about 11 and 14 and MMOs and time and all this is like, I think the thing that proves out that the reason why there hasn't been any 11 focus in that way, or like, why it hasn't been, there's been a champion prize, I think Yoshi P and a lot of the team on 14 would love to make some form of 11 like version that is concrete, that people can play, that is like, that it's like saves its legacy. And I think the problem is that repeatedly the money just doesn't make sense.
Sure.
Like I think the thing is they're doing the data, they're looking at it, and they're like, from their standpoint, they're doing everything they can to make sure that 11 doesn't die just from the lack of dev kits, right? They've tried to make sure that 11, they got the things down so that 11 can stay somewhat profitable. And so at least it doesn't shut down. But yeah, I don't know, man, about like, I think that's been the big problem.
See, I look at Horizon XI, which is like the modding community, has taken it and preserved that game and made it something really special, but also easy to get into. Like, it is ridiculous the amount of hoops you have to jump through just to make an official retail Final Fantasy XI account. And if they can go, about what I see from the modding community tells me that it is humanly possible to do this. But yes, there's going to be different things economic sense for them to do so. And it's like, goodness gracious, like that would be something that I would love to see. Obviously, regardless of whatever iteration, I do think that with 11, there would be some things we'd have to give up. I like when I talk to the 11 community, there's the diehard community that's like, no, I want it exactly like it was in Classic, but just in Unreal. And it's like, okay, like that sounds fine, but it's like there's gonna have, like, I don't want to give up the whole bit of it. I don't want to give up every bit of what makes 11 special. But I think when things like friends lists and various, like, there is a lot of quality of life that can come in and make a huge difference, because I think it's also an expectation that players are going to have. And that's namely, like, again, go ahead.
Frankly, just to be able to use mouse look would be like a night and day change for me to be able to play it. But
getting
like
caught on like a 1 pixel, like little line.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm stuck. Now the monster's eating my face.
Clearly a game made for controllers that didn't even contend with the idea that a mouse would be a main way of engaging with the game. Yeah. But like I guess the thing to me that's always weird about like I want it the same but in Unreal, it's like, well, then why do you want it Unreal? Like, the main point of switching an engine would be to leverage present technologies in order to like because if you want it identical, presumably you don't want it Unreal, because the renderers and all that stuff is going to make it really hard and an insane amount of work to be the same.
Yeah, I think when they say they want it, like, they want to recreate that feeling, and that
feeling came from being in it. But that feeling came not from just from the game, but a specific point in time of your life.
Yeah,
right.
Like, that's always the case with MMOs.
Right. Yeah. Meaning, like, that's why it's like, I think some concessions were going to need to be made. Like, if it is a server-based game, you do need the ability for cross-server. Just like there are things that they could do that would benefit overall the game, and thus make it more marketable. But where is that line? And that line is going to be different for everybody, and it becomes a contentious debate between like the old school MMO players. Where coming from Final Fantasy XI, there are things that I was like, that I loved about it. That classes, the jobs themselves had a unique role to play, and it wasn't about bringing the player; it was about bringing the right job to the fights. And so you could find yourself being, oh, this piece of content isn't for a bard. Like it's like, no offense, no bards needed. But then there's this other piece of content that's like, oh, we absolutely need that job. That is going to make all the difference.
And I think that would be great to preserve, but maybe it's the lore nerd side of me. I think the most important thing is like the experience of the story, and a lot of that stuff is number one. And then a very close number two is all that side. But also that's what made 11 unique. So I get people wanting to have that job stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, especially with 14 mobile. I'm glad that they've talked about the monetization, that it's not a gotcha. And that just also then goes to say, like, well, why just restrict it on mobile? Like, if the only reason not to bring it to the Switch or something like that is that it could cause confusion with the fact that there's another version of Final Fantasy XIV, it will be, I wonder if it's going to be a Wii and Wii U situation over again. It's like, oh yeah, wait, what? It's like, I thought we have 14 at home, kids. No, we want the
the real
console,
14.
the real 14 or something like that. Now, Four Horsemen in chat says, I'm starting to get too old for Final Fantasy XIV. It's finding it harder and harder to remember all the mechanics in these dungeons and alliance raids. I don't know, like when it, like, not to throw shade at from a mechanics perspective, but I have my biggest complaint about dungeons is that they're just a cakewalk. Like I haven't, and maybe the new dungeons for some reason.
Dungeons. There's Dawn Trail's the first time they're real. Well, not the first time, but at Dawn Trail they said, okay, we understand that we want it harder. We've actually started tuning it up. So I would say across the board, things are getting harder.
Even when you're leveled up with like better gear, because that's the thing where it's like you just go into the dungeon. It's literally like hot knife through butter. It's a rush to the end line, and that can be fine, but it's
the eye level is, they are making mechanics in such a way that while your eye level still is always going to make things way easier. So 4 patches down the line, it's going to be easier. The mechanics are more getting, I wouldn't say they're like now super involved, but they're getting more and more involved in a way, and accumulating failures actually becomes a problem. Mm-hmm. So like, yeah, sure, you just face tanked one of that attack, but the thing is the next attack comes in like 5 seconds later, enough time that if a healer's not on the ball, you're not on the ball, it's actually enough to be a problem. So yeah.
I've never liked raids or dungeons in MMOs because it requires so much cooperation with other players. And when I was a big WoW player back in the day, I was the only one of my friends that knew. And so like there was no way for me to coordinate with other people. What I will say, well, my experience with 14, obviously you're allowed to bring in the bots, right? Which has been helpful. But also the community's been great in terms of like just sticking with you and teaching you, to the point where there were multiple where we kept failing at the end. And they were just like, yeah, let's keep doing with it. So that felt to me like the barrier to entry was a little bit lower in terms of difficulty. And I appreciated it. I can imagine if, you're someone that's put in thousands of hours and you want a harder challenge, where's that at? But I haven't felt like Leroy Jenkins ever in a dungeon on 14.
Yeah, no,
at least feel like that once.
Yeah, I know there's been a lot to do about the way in which 14 can sometimes either have toxic positivity or it can have false positivity. But I will point out that like compared to a lot of other MMOs I played, the expectation of we will help you try to understand a lot of the fundamental dungeons and trials is a relatively consistent thing, to the point where it's usually pretty notable if you have a particularly bad experience in a dungeon. Not that it doesn't happen. Obviously, Brian, I know you've had multiple issues and your wife had issues with it, but like I do think, especially from my time with WoW, Guild Wars 2 and other content, it is at least remarkable in that it is to be remarked on.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because like I was watching a video from like Upper Echelon. He put out his like 600-hour review of Throne and Liberty, and he kind of talked about just the inner drama and like player driven like fallouts and chaos. And I was like, I think there is a part of that is one of the things that makes these games kind of special, is that there is this aspect where in a single player game, you're not going to have that. And it's interesting because the games then facilitate these various different, mechanisms, right? Like in that game, you actually have PvP. You can go and like duke it out, etc. You can kind of like, there is a conclusion to that story. My thought is, and I'd like to get your take on it, and then I want to jump into Four Horsemen's other topic, because that's the big topic also for the show is Game of the Year. But I was wondering, I was like, because Final Fantasy XIV like is so mainly a PvE game, because it doesn't necessarily have like a player-driven economy, because it doesn't have those like various elements because it streamlines the experience in such a way. Do you think that the drama that naturally comes across like in game is actually exported out to YouTube? Because that's where I think that's where the 14 drama is. It's literally on the content creation side.
I think it's like 6 things that are pretty easy to point out, though. Okay. One is that if you have a lot of people who are somewhat invested in something and you put them into a space where part of the expectation is you're going to socialize together, you will get drama. That is part of being human. It happens in all cultures, all societies. 14 is not exempt from that. It happens in WoW. It happens in Guild Wars 2. It happens in all the other MMOs. So not to dismiss it out of hand, but to say that like its existence is not something you get rid of in totality. You can minimize it. You can do all sorts of stuff. Secondly, I think one is that the people who are most invested in 14 are most likely to seek out content and to do other things, which again is true for other things. So you're creating sort of insular like cultures within cultures of also, and then those things are feeding into each other. It is the same way that a lot of people think that Reddit or Twitter are like the mass opinion when it's like 4% of the population, I think what happens is that it gets exported to YouTube. You have people who become not necessarily voice boxes for it, but they're voice boxes for informing about it. Let's say like your Mr. Happy, Zeplo, whatever. But then like that, and then that fosters like that it gets consolidated, but also it gets broadcasted. So if 98% of the people I know who play 14 are completely tapped out of all of that. They're like, they're just like enjoying this game and they're, having a good time and stuff. And it's the same way that like, there are assholes in 14. There's plenty of them. They are so typically the minority that like you're going to have a bad experience if you play long enough. It's going to happen. I promise you, but it's like statistically relatively low. But yeah, I think a lot of that is exported to YouTube and then becomes, because there aren't even a ton of 14 YouTubers. I mean, there's a lot of us, but there's not a ton compared to, some other MMOs or games that like, it feels like it's the fabric of the 14 community as a whole when it probably represents maybe 20% on the outside.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I ran into one of those type of people you just described, and I told them they don't have to watch me, so they could stop.
Yeah.
And
it's okay.
They didn't like that either. And I just like, well, I don't care. It is interesting. People like drama. People are incentivized. Like it's, gossip drama, all that stuff. And I also feel like content creation, like you were saying, is kind of, when you talk about gaming in general, there's a lot of YouTube videos out there. Let's talk about the latest drama with this, or this happened, or this person said this. And it's not necessarily, it's like tabloids for digital content.
Yes, it is.
Well, it sells, and that's why it happens. So it keeps perpetuating itself, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And then the thing that's, I guess, the piece to to resistance about the whole thing is that you'll have people going like, but I really want to watch X content. And it's like, you don't though.
I can tell you, like, when people put out thoughtful, nuanced content, people don't watch it. You know, like the thing is that some people do and they deeply love it and they deeply appreciate it. But the reality is just most people don't.
Yeah. The best YouTube channel I've ever watched before has like 3,000 subscribers and some of the best videos for understanding game designs and philosophy and all that. No one cares. People want slop, and we all know it. We want what RFK Jr. would look at us if we were eating and say, "Stop that, put it down." But that's what we put inside our brains, and we enjoy it
with that face of disappointment. Like,
I mean, like, and that's the thing that it's like, even if people don't want slop, that is what people are watching. Like, you can argue whether or not actually people would like to branch out, or what, like, you can argue that for days, but what you can't argue is that it is, I can tell you just from putting out videos that if I put out thoughtful, long, or nuanced pieces, they will always do worse. And at first you can be like, okay, well, it's just that topic wasn't as interesting, but you do it on a long enough time scale and you can just see it borne out with the data. And you can talk about whether that's algorithmically, whether that's just internet discourse, like what causes that. There's tons of reasons to argue, but it's true.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want it to be true. I want it to change. I think it can be changed, but it is true.
I think that's usually where the frustration ends up coming in. Is I always kind of define it as that, like, it's, I want to will that other people would just do as I say. Like, just, all right, I'm gonna, like, you don't have that power, so it gets. I think that's where you get the frustration. You're like, oh, I actually don't have any control over what this person actually produces or makes. Yeah. I'm powerless. Yes, that's right, because we're all interested in the topic, but the level of influence we have is not equally shared. Now
just
let's jump.
You want to see?
Yeah, I mean the change you want to see for sure. The Four Horsemen says, "I know it's late, but what do you guys pick for the game of the year?" And that's our other big topic for today's podcast. Game of the year noms are out. Positive, negative. Are there any snubs that you see, or what is your personal game of the year so far?
Oh, that's hard. Do you want to go first, Mark? Because I've been talking a bunch.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about this, I feel like, last episode too, like what are our leaders. I think, I mean, from what I've seen, the biggest controversy with this year's nominees is the inclusion of DLC.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a controversial take on that one.
And I to me, it's, I think an interesting way of thinking about it is because I've seen a lot of developers talk about, is it Moon Studios, that developer over there, says I get why they included it as someone who makes games. Like it's a huge new addition and all that. I see people complaining about it because it's like, well, why didn't you include it last year for Future Redeem? That was such a hugely successful and large scale DLC for a major game, for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. And I guess to me, it's one of those things where I would almost ask this question: can you play it without playing the main game?
Yes. Yeah.
Like if you can, then yeah, why not? It's almost like Miles Morales, but it's attached to this game. But if you have to play through the whole game, at that point, it's getting a little convoluted to where I can at least say, hey, I get why people are sus about this, even though I think everyone unanimously loves it. There are people that loved it, but are like, why the heck did this get nominated?
Have you seen the conspiracy theory about how it got nominated though? Is that they desperately did not want to include Dragon Age Veilguard, and if they did, if it wasn't this, you know, like that would have caused some kind of consternation.
That is some internet detective conspiracy. Look, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that is the sort of thing that absolutely strikes me of the I didn't like Veilguard, or I didn't like it, and I want this to be true more than what there's any evidence for.
Yeah, I think all the controversy around Veilguard aside, the best thing you could say about it is BioWare made a game that works. Right, like, and people were having, like, I've seen the gameplay, and the gameplay looks actually decent. It doesn't seem like it's an actual BioWare RPG where your choices matter at all, and the dialogue, like all the culture war stuff aside, it just feels trite and badly written.
Thank you,
and frankly dumb, like uninteresting.
I've been a huge BioWare fan. I really like Dragon Age Origin. I like the darker fantasy. I'm even a little bit more mid on Inquisition than I think some people are. Like, I'm frustrated by the dumb, like, culture war stuff around Veilguard, because I can't just talk interesting, thoughtfully about why I don't think it's very good just because it's not very good, not because of any of that bullshit, which is most of it. Just
that's where, like, I get so frustrated at the culture war within games, is because everybody puts things up and, like, you can't critique this because that means you're attacking, you know, this group or this idea, and it's like, that's not fair.
Well, see, I was saying the other way around has been my issue. Issue is that the amount of people who just sling like, oh, it's absolute trash because it's woke, or it's like,
that too.
I mean, both are true, but what you're saying is absolutely just as true. It's just like whenever I'm like interested in talking about something, I can't even like say a thoughtful critique because it sounds like a dog whistle to some people because it's like, oh my god, guys, I'm not like
That goes back to like 10 minutes in the show where it's like a thoughtful and introspective critique. Nah, it's like you get the meme, you know, like nah, and then it's like drama and crap. Oh yeah, that's what we want.
Yeah,
it goes back to us wanting to make a mountain out of a molehill.
Yeah. I'm curious what you guys think, because I feel like I have the controversial opinion that like I actually like the inclusion of Shadow of the Erdtree. Now, cards on the table. I'm a huge FromSoft fan. I'm an enormous FromSoft fan. To the point, I wouldn't say I'm a FromSoft stan, but I'm a big FromSoft fan. So like it, obviously I'm excited on that level. But genuinely for me, it's to your point about can it stand on its own? And to me, Shadow of the Erdtree stands on as a beautiful piece of art and a full game that you could play beginning to end, literally if you excise it from Elden Ring to me. So like on that merit, to me, it passes. I also think that if the counter argument is, well, if this, why not the other thing? I can't speak to the Xenoblade Chronicle expansion. I haven't played it, so I don't know. But like, I mean, assuming it's the same like criteria I'm setting up for Shadow of the Erdtree, then yeah, it should have been,
Which, and to that point, it's just a matter of they decided to start doing it this year. Why then? And that's something we're not privy to. We can only speculate. I would say then, okay, create some norms around the decision-making process and transparency. So moving forward, if something like this happens again, there isn't another future redeem type scenario that is excluded. And, so yeah, I am curious is because Jeff Keighley, this is his thing, right? The Game Awards or no?
Yeah, basically it's his baby. It's his whole
I would just be curious about why that happened. Is it because this DLC was so significant that they had to do it? Is it because it was so significant? And frankly, for the most part, 2024 was a little bit more mild compared to past years, which I'm a little sad Space Marine 2 isn't on there because it's the most it's just a fun game. But yeah, I mean, that again, speaking about drama and speaking constructively, like we might just see this as the norm moving forward, or create a separate category too. Best DLC.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, I'm surprised that they didn't like create a new category for it because, like, it's hard, right? Because if you don't have a ton
you have
of
5 expansions that happened this year. Because that would be the counter argument that it's like, there's 3 expansions that came out.
Is 3 really that bad of like choosing? As long as you have 3, if it's only like 2 or 1, then I get it.
Right? But, but then it's like, are you?
But what if not every year you have one?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So then all of a sudden it's like this year we're gonna have expansion, reward, and I don't know. I think it's a tough call, but as long as this isn't the only time they have an expansion in the game of the year nominees, because if this is the only time, then it's just I think that's gonna make this feel even. And if they win, then that's gonna feel really, really low.
What makes me sad is I think it's an interesting conversation, and it makes me sad that it has to be such a fever pitch. Everybody's angry and frustrated rather than like what if we just actually talk about this and think about why this is interesting or a bad reason? Like, it's okay to like breathe and then talk and critique, right? Yeah. As opposed to just reaction.
That's the consequence of 24/7 content news, right? Everything you have to make a big deal. And then when there are big deals, you react the same way. And to everyone else, it's like, it's not a big deal. They reacted that way the other day. I'm just curious, I guess, right? FromSoft is great. I have not beaten Elden Ring. The other game nominations, I think are all solid too. AstroBot, BeLatro. I think BeLatro should probably win.
The fact that BeLatro's on it is the fact that BeLatro on it tells me that they're at least paying attention, right? Yeah. Like to me, BeLatro's a good example of like obviously this is not just like okay, what are the 4 AAA games that came out? It's like no. Here's some like interesting choices.
Yeah.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Out of the list of the game of the year stuff, what would you guys vote for basically?
With what's there, I would say AstroBot.
With what's there, I'm going to take out Shadow of the Erdtree just on the face of it. I think AstroBot's a really good choice, frankly, because it's a wonderful game and it's also a wonderful game. This is a weird way to put it, that didn't need to exist. I don't know if you guys played like just the AstroBot that the PS5 came with.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
It alone is awesome. Like it's just straight awesome. So the fact that they went the extra mile then to me, which I guess shouldn't matter, but it's a wonderful platformer. It's genuinely a great time.
Agreed.
I think for me, like out of what I've played, like Metaphor is where I would cast that, because it's just been such a great experience. And I never played the Persona game, so kind of stepping into this, but it's got more my style with the fantasy has been phenomenal and kind of a top tier experience.
Yeah. Definitely either the best RPG of the year or like definitely one of at the very least.
That's a game I haven't heard anything bad about, except one content creator who I've enjoyed over the years that admits it's not a game for him and has made fun of the dialogue. But I think I could easily see that. And I'm the same boat as you, Brian. I've never played a Persona game. I'm curious. The thing about the Persona games that have always pushed me away is like, I don't want to go back to high school.
Yeah.
Like that, like, oh, let's, high school drama, all that's like, come on, man. I have a hard enough time dealing with drama at work. I don't want to put that into my after work time. To Brian's point, it being a high fantasy game that I think deals with significant human questions and in a good way, right? Too, because that's some of the other things people have said. Why aren't people upset about this game? It's like, well, I think the main difference is metaphor is done well. It's written in a way that is actually sophisticated in a very human way versus just you feel like you're getting something slammed down your throat that you didn't ask for.
Well, execution matters, right?
Well, yeah. People have tried to label that game, and I'm like, no, it's like, and even in just because it offers themes that might be considered as part of the culture war, it's like legitimately they'll even have pushback on those same themes. They're not afraid to like you have a character that doesn't agree with like this person's worldview, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's great. These are good characters. This is a good story. This is an interesting universe. Like I'm all in on it. This is great.
I think people need to chill in terms of like you can engage with something without just saying yes, like this is good or this is bad. Like instead you can say, hey, let's engage with it. But it feels like people have been trained that just showing the thing on its merit makes a fundamental statement, which to be fair, it does. But then if you actually engage with what's put in front of you, like that should be the merit on how you rate it. But the problem is like half the time people aren't even playing a game. They're watching a content creator, taking their opinion, taking all their opinions stated as fact as what's in the game or what is or how it's portrayed, and then making all of their arguments and cases based on that interpret. Like there's like 3 levels of textual remove. I keep running into situations like that where I'll have a conversation with someone and like halfway through, turns out they've never actually played or watched the thing. They like read or watched a summary or a like analysis by a content creator, and then they start making points that just aren't not even like right or wrong, but like factually not true.
I think that's one of the problems that really kind of get summed up is that there's definitely people out there who just want to be told what to say and think. And like they're, it's like, that's it. Like, I just want a surface level understanding of this topic and I'm not interested in.
What's hard is when those people think they're the free thinkers. Like that's when it gets really weird is like when those people are the people saying I'm the free thinker about this. It's like, but you're parroting. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, you could get into real deep conversations about epistemology and metaphysics there about what really constitutes a free thinker. And if we are using some form of logic that was taught by someone else, how free are we thinking? But I will say this.
Somebody's having a crisis right now. Like, am I even real?
Yeah, but
what is reality?
To that point, we live in and sometimes I wonder if this has to do with the proliferation of just college degrees. Not saying that's a bad thing, but hey, we're all a lot of people went to college. We've read a lot. We want to feel like we know things.
Sure.
We're afraid to just say, I don't have an opinion on that.
Yeah. 100%.
I don't know.
It's okay to not have an opinion.
Yeah. Like I get that a lot. People ask me on stream all the time, what do you think about this? I'm like, I don't know who that is. You don't? I'm like, no. What do they do?
And then how do you not know who that is? It's like, I don't know. I guess I'm not you.
It's okay to be not tapped in on everything all the time.
Yeah.
And you can't have a deep understanding of something if you're being asked to have a deep understanding of everything, right?
Yeah, sure. Even things that I'm aware of, I'm like, I don't have time. Like, it's not that important.
Now, another comment. Four Horsemen, thanks so much for being a part of the show here today. I appreciate you. I like their comments. They said the reason that they would vote Final Fantasy VII over something like AstroBot is that they put 300 hours into Final Fantasy VII, and then they couldn't play AstroBot for 300 hours.
Totally
and there's
valid.
something to be said there. Like, and we've talked about this in the past. I made this point multiple times, is that the kid in me, like, 60-hour, RPG, let's go. I think it took me, even with the boosted experience, roughly just under 40 hours for Final Fantasy IV Pixel Remaster. So if I had to grind, I could easily see that getting back up to that 60-hour mark. Well, now as an adult, I'm like, all right, so Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, I can beat this in like 10 hours. And there's a little extra chapter story that I can take part in after that. That's maybe 10 hours. Like, you're talking to me about a 20-hour RPG. that's something I can do.
Yeah.
Like I can commit to that and get that knocked out in a week. As
3
opposed
great
to,
hours. Give me 3 great hours instead of 300 pretty good hours. That's where I'm at.
Well, and I'm saying that the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is 300 okay hours. Like I've heard that people have just absolutely praised it. I am gonna finish Final Fantasy VII Remake, and then I'm gonna step into Rebirth. And I'm kind of in this boat where I'm like, by the time I finish 7 Remake, like is Rebirth going to be out on PC? Because then do I want to just go ahead and play it on PC with the hope that they, Square Enix is like, hey, we're just going to put it, on GeForce Now, because that's the other little bit of news that we didn't even touch on this week is that with Xbox's cloud, they've announced that Final Fantasy XIV is actually going to be running on xCloud along with the Pixel remasters, along with all these things. This has been a feature that I'm like, why is xCloud the worst when Microsoft is so cloud, focused for their business, and yet xCloud is like, doesn't even run your games. Well, now they're adding them. Square Enix games, Pixel remasters. 14 was a really exciting thing to see there, because then I'm like, okay, well, maybe that will translate into it coming out to GeForce Now, would be next, because Square Enix seems to be rolling out some support for that game. Does anybody know, like, if in chat or you're watching this as a comment, I'll be sure to read the comments. Is Dragon Quest 3 2D HD remake on GeForce Now? Because I don't think it actually is.
I don't think so. I will say, by the way, Rebirth comes out PC. Isn't the PC release for it like in 2 days?
Did they announce that?
Yeah. Well, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I just misread.
I feel like I would see more stuff about that.
No, I would have seen more stuff like that. Is AI lying to me? Probably.
No. Yeah, maybe.
No.
It's saying November 24th, but then I'm also seeing that's the Google AI response, right? For you?
Yeah, but I also I'm trying to look at some others. Where's this coming from?
Yeah, I'm not seeing a release date, and it's definitely not coming out the week of Thanksgiving.
Yeah, no. Well, you say that, but they're releasing the Ultimate Raid for 14 on Thanksgiving, and then the Chaotic Alliance Raid comes out on Christmas Eve. So
that's the part of that. That's just the patch schedule falling into line. Like, hey,
it gets better. Actually, there's some insinuation that their thought process was, but everyone's on vacation, so people will be able to play, as opposed to Americans, where we're like, no one's doing it, everyone's traveling, and
we're traveling.
Yeah,
I'll be
all
eating
right. Elio, you're eating.
Yeah,
nice. Elio, where can people find you, sir?
Yeah, you can find us over on the Eorzean Archive, where we release Final Fantasy XIV lore-based content. You can also find us our Discord at discord.gg/Eorzean Archives, where we have a fun community that mainly focuses on playing 14, talking about it, and have a bunch of events and stuff that go on.
All right. And Mark, where can people find you?
You can find me on X at Mark Liberto, or YouTube and Twitch at Late to the Game. Tune in if you want to have someone who will be very blunt and share their opinions in ways that seems to have, like, I just don't care about a lot of things. I care about the things that are important, and I'll tell you right now, if you have passion about, like, someone will share something with me and be like, oh, this is wrecking my life. You probably shouldn't let it do that to you. You should go outside and enjoy your life.
A good shrug is a good thing.
Yeah.
All right, that's great. And then, guys, for me, you can find me right here as well. I just launched the Ginger Prime TV for all the future live streams. We'll keep the podcast here on Prime. But all the live stream reacts and stuff like that just crossed over 200 subs over on Ginger Prime TV this week, which was exciting to see. So thank y'all for that support. We'll keep plugging away. That will just make it easier for me when I stream, which is very rarely, but still where do you watch? It's like, am I on these different channels? I was like, let's just make one channel that's going to be the live one. And that's what we're rocking and rolling on the way on a going forward basis. But guys, that's it. That's the show. Go check out these amazing guys. They're awesome to hang out with, and I appreciate them making time for me today to talk about all this stuff. We'll be back not next week, actually. It's Thanksgiving week, guys. We're going to be off. We're going to be relaxed. We're going to be having a good old fun time, and we hope that we guys get to hang out with you and see you guys in the following week. And then hope you guys if you're celebrating Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving. If you're not celebrating Thanksgiving, have a great rest of your week, and we will see you guys here when we do. Peace.